Yo, what's good, guys? Inswain with Inswain Audio. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, man, where have you been? We missed you. Make sure to subscribe and join the family because I drop videos just like this pretty much every day, man. Who else is doing that? Come on. Welcome. We missed you. Anyways, today I'm going to be talking about 10 habits that a lot of people have when mixing that are just ruining their mixes. Hopefully you're not doing them. If you are, let's tackle it now. Let's get into it. All right, the first one is the most common one that people reiterate all over the internet, and it's true. I'm just going to get it out of the way. You've probably heard it, but that is don't mix with your eyes. What does this mean? I think a lot of people know that it means like when you're EQing, don't just look at the EQ and where you see a big, the hump, remove it and cut it, or vice versa, where there's a hole, fill it. Um, yeah, there's some merit to that, but what it really means is use your ears and change things that sound bad or enhance things that sound better, right? It doesn't matter what anything looks like. And this goes for beyond EQ. It's not just EQ, it's anything. But also, I like to take this a step further and point out how our eyes can play psychological tricks on our ears, where if we're looking at a visual, representation of audio, it's actually going to change the way that we hear. The visual information that we take in alters our perception of what we're hearing. So if you're seeing something like I always use the example of like the FabFilter Saturn 2 plugin, as you drive more saturation, the color goes from like a dark red to a bright red. Like the colors become more saturated, which is kind of like a clever way to visualize saturation. So I give them points there. I love that plugin. But what I'm saying is because it gets brighter, our eyes see that as, it looks better. It's more aesthetically pleasing. So our ears like, oh, it sounds better. Even if there was no sound changing, if you were to change that the way it looks, you would think, ooh, it's sounding better, but it actually sounds the same because our eyes play tricks on us. I'm sure there's plugins where the harder you drive them or when you turn them on, they get bright, right? And then you turn them off and they're dark and gray. When we see that bright color, we like that and we're like, this sounds good, but it might actually not. So don't let your eyes play tricks on you. Mix with your ears, not your eyes. Another big mistake that a lot of mixers make is not referencing. I say it a lot on this channel, but I just can't say it enough. And it's so true that if you reference mix, your mixes will just improve. Like, I don't know how else you want me to elaborate on it. You just got to trust me. It took me a long time to get on board, but once I did, I was like, wow, this is what I've been missing. I can now make my mixes sound like any mix that I want. A thing that I see a lot of mix engineers make the mistake of doing is relying on presets too much. Now, let me just start and say that I'm not against presets. They're awesome, especially presets you make for yourself. They can save a lot of time and shortcut you to the end result faster, but always using the same preset or needing a preset that's built into a plugin to get somewhere can kind of hinder you, and it's going to ruin your mixes because you want to be able to make unique effects and unique settings. One, to keep things interesting, but two, because every song's different, every vocal's different, every recording is different. We always need to be adjusting to fit to the music. So a one size fits all preset isn't always going to work in like 99.9% of cases. So don't get me wrong, presets can be great. I advocate for them, but they can be a hindrance too. Another mistake that a lot of mixing engineers make, and I've never heard anyone else mention this, so hopefully this is new for you, is they don't read the manual to the plugins they get. Now, hold up, don't lose me here. As boring and nerdy as that sounds, if you just take a couple minutes, they're usually just like 1 or 2 pages, just basic stuff. It's not as scary as it seems. If you just Google like or download the PDF for the manual and you just read through it, you'd be surprised how much you're going to learn about the plugins that you just got or that you've been using for years and you didn't realize. Even if you get like let's say you get a compressor, like I know what a ratio is. I don't need to read the manual. Sometimes by reading the manual, you realize little intricacies of the plugins or neat tricks it can do or little idiosyncrasies that it has that you weren't aware of, and it'll just increase your knowledge and you'll use the plugin differently and better because of that. I can't stress it enough that if you just take a minute to read the manual, it will make your life so much easier. I do it for every plugin I buy. On the same token as the last one, another mistake that a lot of mixers make is they buy too many plugins. This is a problem for a lot of reasons, but the one that I'm going to focus on today is if you have too many tools, you never really get too good with any of them. If you just focus on what you have and you learn your small set of tools inside and out, you're going to be amazing with them as opposed to getting 40 different EQs and not really being proficient in any of them. Yeah, it's nice to have plugins. We all love them. I'm guilty of it. And they can really help take your mixes to the next level when the time comes, but sometimes it can be a hindrance to have too many tools. And more of the mix engineers that I work with have the problem of having too many plugins as opposed to not having the tools to begin with. So most mix engineers struggle with having too many plugins, not enough. One of the biggest mistakes that I see mix engineers make is they incorporate too many mix tricks into their mix. Right, so when you first start mixing, you're a complete beginner. You don't know what to do. You don't know where to start. You learn the basics, right? And your mixes aren't good, but that's part of the course. Then you start to get better and better, and you start, absorbing more information. You learn this trick from this YouTuber. Maybe you learn something from me. Whatever. You learn something from someone else. You learn to sidechain the kick and do this EQ and sweep this and dynamic EQ and multi-band compression, and you learn all these tricks. You start incorporating them one by one, and you're getting good results from them. But eventually you get to the point where you've learned so many tricks and you try to incorporate all of them into every mix, and you have 40 plugins on your kick drum, side chaining to your right, and it just becomes a mess that's just ruining the song and making it worse. And if you're at this stage and this happens to you, try this. Next time you feel like you're over processing something, just turn every plugin off and listen. It's going to sound better. Don't feel bad. That's normal. We all have gone there. That's how you know, okay, I'm doing too much. I've absorbed so much information. And don't get me wrong, all of these tips can be good in isolation or in combination depending on the source, but you don't always need to do everything, right? A good chef knows how to use all the ingredients and cook all the dishes, but they're not putting every spice and seasoning in every dish they make. They're using it when it needs it to be used. And the same thing goes for these mix tricks. So be careful not to fall into that trap. Another issue I see mix engineers make a lot is they're over processing on their mix bus. I'm not against mix bus processing. I think it's needed in most cases and it can sound great. And what works for you works for you. Some people like a little bit more, some people like a little bit less. So don't get me wrong, I'm not someone that says don't put anything on your mix bus or one plugin on your mix bus. Whatever works, but I see an issue a lot with mix engineers is they have too much processing. What is too much? I can't really give you an exact answer because it depends on your style, the genre, the song, how much mixing you're doing on the individual track level, right? So I can't give you an exact number, but just be aware that it's very easy to overdo your mix bus. And the thing with the mix bus, as you know, whatever you do there is happening to everything at the individual level. So if you put too much EQ on your mix bus, that's ruining everything, right? It's not like you're just over EQing the guitar and ruining the guitar. No, you're ruining everything. So less tends to be more on the mix bus, but it depends. Another bad habit that a lot of mixers have, and I don't really know if this is a habit because a lot of times it's just a lack of resources, and I get it. Sometimes though, it's just a lack of awareness. So I want to at least bring it up. And this is not having a properly treated environment to mix in. Now, like I said, I understand it's expensive. It can be hard. The resources and the location is tough, but you should be trying to do what you can to make the environment you mix in as good as possible. If you can't, you can eliminate the room by mixing in headphones. Now, that has its own problems, right? Monitors versus headphones is a whole debate I'm not going to get into here, but just keep in mind that having an untreated room is really going to hinder your mixes. I would rather have a good treated room and bad monitors as opposed to good monitors and a bad treated room. So do with that what you will. Another bad habit that a lot of mixers make is they don't listen to enough mixes, right, from other engineers, whether the ones they look up to or just famous mixes. This is how you learn. You study the greats, right? People that come up playing basketball, they watch the basketball legends. They learn from them. They take notes. They watch film or whatever they do. You got to be doing that with mixing. You got to listen to mixes to know what you're striving for or what the goal should be. Of course, you could take it in a different route. Everyone has their own taste, but if you don't even know what a good mix sounds like, how are you ever going to even know if you can achieve that? So you got to be studying and listening to other mixes. And even if they're mixes that you don't necessarily like, you can still extract something from it and learn from it and know what you don't like about it and incorporate your own taste in your next mix. So it's all valuable. One of the biggest bad habits that I see mixers make, I make it all the time, that is mixing for too long. Your sessions are too long. I know it's easier said than done. When we're in the zone, and sometimes we got work to do and we don't have the luxury of stopping. We have things to get done. So I get it. I've been there. I still go there and I'll continue to go there. But it can definitely hinder your mixes if you work for too long. I've covered it in other videos, how you have physical alterations and psychological alterations and how you perceive sound over time. And if you're mixing for too long, you're going to hear things differently, particularly in the high end. So that's an issue. So what do? Take breaks. Like I said, I know it's a luxury sometimes we can't afford, but I like to at least point it out so that you're aware of it. And if you can afford a break, you have time, maybe take a day off in between, work on multiple songs. That's a big one, is instead of working on one song for 4 hours and then the next day working on it for 4, right? Work on one song for 2 hours and then another song on 2 hours. If you're working on multiple mixes, do a little of each one each time so your ears stay fresh on the perspective of the mix. That can help, but nothing's going to beat just time away from the speakers. So hopefully you learned something from this. If you're making any of these mistakes, maybe you can fix them. Maybe not. We're not perfect, but I hope you learned something from this. My name is Inswain with Inswain Audio. Peace!